Right. In Ephesians 5, we have commands for husbands and wives. Everyone knows, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. Everyone realizes that's a very important concept, and that it applies regardless of what the wife does. Even if she's not, say she's not submissive, say she's not loving back, say she's, downright mean to him, he's still stuck with, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. That's his job. He does it because Christ loved the church in that way. Even before we loved him, even before we were, even while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Then we get to the part about the wives, and it says, "Wives, submit as unto the Lord," which in English means basically as if he were Yahweh. In other words, treat your husband when submitting as if Yahweh had said those words. Then you have a few more modifying phrases for life. It says, "As the church is subject to Messiah," and that means all the time. In every situation, we as the church are subject to Messiah. We should always obey him. And it also uses the phrase, "in everything," which is used other places like, "in everything give thanks," and we all know that there's nothing that we don't give thanks for. When it says in everything, it really does mean everything, it means all. That's the way it's used through the entire New Testament. So, if you read through this, it sounds to me very similar to husbands, love your wives. No exceptions really apply. No conditions apply. Husband loves your wife as Christ loved the church. No exceptions apply. Wives, submit to your husbands in everything. So, basically, there's three different categories of submission. So, here we have something that the husband has said. He could tell her to obey a command of Yahweh. He could tell her something that has no command in any direction. Or he could tell her to disobey a command of Yahweh. Alright, in this case, when he tells her to obey a command of Yahweh, pretty obvious. She's supposed to be doing that anyway, she's going to do that. That scenario is pretty easy. We know that she should submit if her husband is telling her to do something that Yahweh already said to do anyway. Then you have the second one. No command. If there's no command on the subject, say it's something like have dinner on the table at a certain time. Something like that. There's no command of Yahweh for that or against that. So, in essence, this category doesn't even really exist though. Because there is a command for her to submit to her husband. So therefore it is already obeying a command. So really, this category doesn't even really exist because it's included in this category. Which only leaves us with, what should she do if her husband tells her to disobey a different command of Yahweh? Now we've got this up here, obey in everything. It would seem kind of funny if the in everything really only means obey what God already said anyway. It seems kind of funny to go to all this trouble of saying, do it as if he were, obey him as if what he said was what Yahweh said, do it as the church is subject to Christ, do it in everything. Seems kind of wild that what he really meant was only obey a command. For instance, Abraham, he was told to sacrifice his son Isaac. That's obviously, sacrificing Isaac is obviously a command that is going to fall into, you're not supposed to murder, you're not supposed to do human sacrifice. That's a disobey. Yahweh told Abraham to do something that's different, that's disobeying other commands. So what did Abraham do, and what was the right thing for him to do? The right thing for him to do was to go ahead and obey this. So he obeyed Yahweh, even when it was telling him to do something disobedient to other commands. So, when it says, as unto Yahweh, if we're really obeying, or if we're really submitting to a husband, as unto Yahweh, we do it like Abraham and Isaac, that would include obeying even in the disobey scenario. In 1 Corinthians, we have a passage that tells wives what to do if there's a question about something spiritual. It tells them to ask their husbands at home. So, in the scenario where a wife is saying, wait a minute, you're telling me to disobey a command, there's a question about whether this is moral or not. So she asks her husband if it's moral, which immediately, since he's telling her to do it, puts it into this category anyway. Because he's going to say, you're wrong, it's not actually disobeying, it's actually obeying. This is actually what Yahweh says. You misunderstand the command, or that's, some variation of that. Now, there is one other possibility. The other possibility is that the husband says, yes, I admit this is disobeying God, I want you to do it anyway. So, in this case, we look in Peter. What Peter said about that. He said, if you have a husband who obeys not the word, he's not obeying the word. So this husband is not obeying the word. It says to submit to him without a word. In other words, not even a protest. So if you have a husband that is this scenario, Peter sends you right back to this scenario, only he adds the added stipulation that you don't even protest. So by the time you get done with all of this, every one of these scenarios ends up back in the submit in everything, which, if he said everything, he really did mean everything. Now there's one common objection to this idea. And that common objection is found in Acts, when the apostles told the Sanhedrin, basically, we are going to obey God rather than man. Obey God, not man. Alright, now if you think about that, it sounds really good at first. You say, aha, this tells us that we would obey God rather than man. The problem is that this is a command of God. So if you really want to try to apply the Acts situation to this situation, what you're really saying is obey God, not God. Which, that doesn't make any sense. So really what we're doing is we're misunderstanding what's happening in Acts. In Acts, what we have is the Sanhedrin who, according to the end of Matthew, Yeshua, when he died, he said, all authority has been given unto me. You go out and make disciples. He took authority, he took all the religious authority away from the Sanhedrin. They have no authority. So, in essence, when they tell the apostles, don't teach in Yeshua's name, they are saying it as a man. They have no authority from God. So it really is obey God, not man. And you can see that also in the parable of the vineyard, where he says that the keepers of the vineyard keep killing the servants that the owner sends, and eventually also kill the son. The Pharisees knew that this was spoken against them. That they were, and the end of the parable is that the owner of the vineyard is going to come throw those guys out and put in other people who will grant the fruit of the vineyard in its time. So, those are the apostles. The apostles were actually the ones in authority who actually had authority from God in the situation. So they're obeying God, not man. Those were man's commands for them not to teach in Yeshua's name. Those were not God's commands. The Sanhedrin was no longer an authority. They had no official status from God. However, husbands in this submission scenario do have authority from God. So it wouldn't apply because it would be obey God, not God, if you're trying to say that this applies to a husband and wife scenario.